Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're going to do something really fun, and if you have been following my channel for a year or a little over a year, I would say, then you will recognize the painting that we are working on again. So I started this one a little over a year ago, like I said, and at the time, it was one of the most ambitious pieces that I had ever started, and it was also the reason why there was a point last year where I didn't paint for over a month. I didn't work on anything. It was just sitting on my easel, and it was so daunting and so honestly scary that I ended up putting it on the ground. I faced it toward the wall so that I couldn't see it, and I didn't think about it. I kind of let myself forget that it was there. And then just a couple of weeks ago, honestly, it was time. So I got it back out. I have a bunch of new skills up my belt. I've got a new art medium up my belt, and up my sleeves in my belt. You know what I meant. Anyway, so we're gonna tackle it again, and we're not starting over. We are starting with what I had and making some changes, making some little tweaks. I'm not gonna do it exactly how I had planned originally. I have some new, fresh ideas for it, and it's gonna be really fun. I'm hoping this is just going to be a 2-part series because I've gotten pretty far on it so far for this video. So yeah, let's get started, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Like I said, this painting is one of the hardest that I've ever had an idea for. I think in the beginning I had all of these great expectations for what this painting was going to be, and I think at the time I just really didn't necessarily have the skill set to make it happen. And then honestly, I wasn't painting in the same style last year. I wasn't using oil pastels yet. I didn't know how to work with paint as well as I do now, which is weird to say because it was only a year ago, but I didn't actually film a giant portion of me working on this because I finally felt like I was ready to pick it up and start messing with it again, and I really didn't feel like it was time to put it on camera yet. So I actually took the painting, oil pastels, and some blending stumps out to my couch in the living room, and I sat on the couch and I did oil pastels on that upper center section. I didn't touch the sky at all. I actually really like the blend that I got on the sky, but the last time that I did a video with this one, we were working on some of the shading for those mountains, and while I liked it, it really wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I was having a really hard time with using gouache, getting it to be like what I had in my head. And I think that the reason is that gouache just doesn't work the way that I was trying to get it to work. The thing that I needed, honestly, was pastels. So that the whole background now is shaded, highlighted, low-lighted, accented with oil pastels. And I think that that section just turned out beautifully. This piece that I'm working on right now, this rock, I have actually painted this. I think this is probably the 4th coat of paint going on this section. I had done it a burnt sienna originally. I don't know why I did it a burnt sienna because it did not go. The like super reddish brown didn't match the cool tones that were in the rest of this piece, because if you look at it, the mountains in the far back are the warmest in tone, and then it gets cooler as you get closer to the foreground. And then I randomly had a burnt sienna rock, which is a very warm tone. So I painted over it with just a flat gray, and then I made it a little bit more rocky, and then here is essentially as far as I got with it with paints is what you'll see today. I do end up going over it with oil pastels. I don't remember if that's going to be in this video or not. I'm not actually finished with the painting right now as I'm recording this audio, but I had a considerable amount of footage, so I did split it between 2 videos just so it wouldn't be an hour-long video. As much as I enjoy watching the hour-long videos, sometimes I don't enjoy editing them. You know how that is. So I spend a lot of time just doing this kind of gradual push and pull between light and dark on all of the rocky areas. A lot of this painting in the foreground, I had either not touched it yet, or I had just put on a very cursory base coat. So these rocks right here that I'm now starting, I hadn't even touched. I have them sketched. I don't think you can really see my outlines anymore, but I did have the general shapes sketched out, so I knew how many rocks were going to be here. Since a lot of them are touching, I do generally try to sketch it out a little bit just to help me in case I don't come back to that area right away, which I think was useful because that little rock that's in front of the rather large one, I think I would have just made that a part of the larger rock. It didn't necessarily look like it was a separate rock. So when I do the base coats on them, I try to make them each a slightly different color just so that it's evident that they're not the same rock and that they are separate from each other, even if it's only by like millimeters. In reality, not like on the painting, because they're actually touching on the painting, obviously. You know what I meant. Anyway, so I just do them very slightly different colors so that then later on I'll go back in with more gouache and then more oil pastels, and just having the rocks be slightly different colors will help me with just being able to differentiate and figure out what oil pastel colors go where, etc., etc., etc. So here I had this idea to make a crack in this larger rock, and I kind of go back and forth on it for a little while. I'm honestly still going back and forth on it. I painted it in with a very dark gray and just kind of feather it a little bit to try to... I had a concept in my head of what I wanted it to look like, but I think I would actually have had to go back in time to do it the way that I wanted it to look. So in the end, I end up nearly scrapping this idea. I don't scrap it completely, but I don't do as much of a dramatic crack as I was originally thinking. At some point, I do want to do more rocks that have like that super distinct crack line through them. I think that would be really cool, and it would add a little bit of like a realism to a lot of my rocks, because I'm working on doing more of the uniquely shaped rocks, as we've discussed, but having that crack in there, I think that would help a lot in making them a unique shape, but still a little bit more realistic, because a lot of rocks have, especially on this scale, they would have like a crack in them of some size, shape, or sort. So again, I spent a decent amount of time going back and forth on it, and I was having a hard time filming that section because you really couldn't see what I was doing. So And that's just a product of where my camera is set up and the fact that I'm right-handed. But I have yet to figure out a way to really set up my office to where you would be able to see everything that I'm doing and the camera wouldn't be in my way. So here we are. So this piece I'm working on now, this was originally just going to be a like grassy, mossy little outcropping rather than just straight up a chunk of rock. And the more that I looked at it, the more that just didn't really make sense. So it will have moss and grass on it, but it is primarily made of rock, and that's that. So I'm painting it with kind of a gradient of different shades of gray. I've got a little tiny touch of a cool brown mixed into that gray as well, just to give it a little bit of variation and make it a little bit easier when I do go in with oil pastels and as I add more paint over the top layers. If you paint rocks just a flat color to start with, it works as a base coat, but as you start layering up over that, you're going to want to have variation in color. So as you can see, I have green down already, so I have a base coat on, so I don't need to do a super flat shade of gray. The green is going to come through just a little bit if I want it to, so I need to do a very gradiated, varied shade here where I can do a little push and pull on where I want the light to be hitting and where I don't want it to be hitting. And now we're going to do something very similar on the smaller rocks closer to the foreground. I'm going to go in with paint first, and then in a little while I will also go in with oil pastels. I try to get the bulk of the base tones down with gouache, and then I can go in and do highlights, lowlights, and like detailing with the oil pastels, which sounds really weird because oil pastels are not as precise as gouache, but when you're working on things like mountains or rocks or things that have a much more natural shape to them, I just think it makes a lot more sense to do the oil pastels as your final with, because they add this really nice amount of texture that when you're doing something like a rock just makes sense. It makes it to where like that really looks like a rock because it has more of that rocky texture, because the oil pastel, even with a bunch of layers of paint down, is still going to pick up the canvas texture. So it's going to bring in that little bit of roughness that I think just works really, really well for a lot of the more natural textures that you're going for. So I did decide that I wanted to add a little bit more variation with my gouache layer to this larger rock that I was working on a minute ago, just to make it a little bit easier when I do go in with the oil pastels. My plan with the oil pastels is to add like some cooler greens to the shading as well, just to give that like hint of moss. And then I can go back in with gouache closer to the end of working on this painting to get the rest of the color in the way that I want it, and the rest of the like the moss and the grass and all of that with like the fine detailing that obviously, as I was saying, you really can't get with an oil pastel. I do feel like with this painting I'm really going back and forth between light and dark and light and dark and light and dark and just doing a ton of gray, but I think it's going to be super cool when it comes down to it. And the thing with this painting is that this one was really, really terrifying for me last year when I started working on it. It was one that I had had this amazing vision in my mind of this incredible painting with this really cool background. I mean, look at that. Look how it's so unique. It's so different. I hadn't ever done anything like this. And then it was really disheartening for me last year when I couldn't figure out where to go with it or what to do with it or why it wasn't working. And I was really starting to feel like I was not good at this. I was not cut out for this. How could I continue as an artist if I couldn't even finish the painting that I had a vision for? And I am really excited to be back to working on it because I think that this is a really important thing for anybody to know, really, is that if you get stuck on something, it's okay to turn it around, face it toward the wall, work on your skills, and come back to it when you have the skills and the ideas and the headspace to be able to work on it again. Because at the point that I picked this up again a couple weeks ago, I had nearly forgotten that this painting existed. I had rearranged my office a couple of times, and I did not move this painting. I was aware of what it was, and it was leaned up against the wall, facing the wall, so I couldn't look at it, and I didn't want to look at it. I had zero interest in picking it up, in knowing what it was, in remotely looking at it and feeling bad about myself again. So I had nearly given up on this painting. I was not thinking about it. I was not considering working on it. And then a couple of weeks ago, I'm just sitting on the couch, having my quiet time, and something in my spirit just said, it's time to pick up that painting again. And immediately I knew I just needed to go get it and I needed to work on it. And so I did. I pulled it out and I started with the oil pastels and just playing with it and having fun and letting myself just look at it and think, this was really good for what I had the ability to do last year. Now let's see how much better we can make it with what we can do now. It was a lot of fun. It felt like a really spiritual moment to just sit there and sit on the couch with oil pastels and blending stumps and find myself really enjoying this painting that a year ago had completely terrified me, and that even a couple of months ago when I first got Jester, that was when I rearranged the office, and even then this painting was terrifying to me. It was so scary that I couldn't even look at it. I was determined to not think about it. I was determined to put it out of my mind. And I remember thinking at one point, I think this was probably like January or February, that if I hadn't touched it again by the end of this year, I was just going to gesso over it and use the canvas for something else. And then to find myself sitting here having all of these new ideas for this piece and recognizing exactly what needed to be done to make it into something beautiful. This painting is going to be really, really special for me. It's like I said, it's not done yet. I'm probably going to work on it for another couple of weeks. The next video should be the last part of me working on this if I keep at the current pace that I'm going. But it has just been kind of incredible to sit here and work on this painting and play with all of these new skills and this new medium and really discover how much fun it is to go back and start anew on a painting that was just so terrifying. And I think that's a big part of why I really wanted to do a video with this one. And like I said, I didn't start filming it right away. I don't have footage of me sitting on the couch with oil pastels. I didn't know if it was going to become something really cool. But as soon as it got to the point that I could recognize that, yes, this painting is going to go somewhere really fun and I need to be able to share it with everybody, I have had such a good time just recording this one. And even if it's just for posterity's sake, to be able to, for myself, look back at that video from a year ago and go, look how different you made this painting. Look how much better this painting is. Look how much you've grown in only a year as an artist. And I don't even think it has to be painting. It can be whatever medium you love. Whatever thing you love creating. If you love cooking, you love making recipes, look back at what you were doing last year and look at what you're doing this year. I think it's so cool to see how much we grow in the things we love. When we get to put time and effort and love into it, it is just so cool. And it's been so fun to work on this piece. At this point in the video, I am working on some water. So again, I'm working on a couple of the things that I had wanted to practice more. This is like in my goals for this year. I wanted to do more water, and this painting was in no way in my mind as a painting where I would get to work on water. And yet here we are, and I'm making these little rapids in this stream. And I love how it's coming out. I spent a lot of time working on the water. Both of my camera batteries died while I was working on this river section. So a bunch of this is also not on camera, but it came out so well and it looks so different and so not what I had pictured when I started working on this painting, and not something I thought that I could do even a year ago. And that's just, it's so cool. I don't even really know a better way to put it. It is just really, really fun. If any of you are artists or creatives, I think it is a really good idea just to document what you're working on now, even if it's just a little diary, and then go back every once in a while and see the stuff that you've worked on, the stuff that you're doing now, and compare and give yourself that grace to look at the past and be like, oh, those look really funny. But also look at the stuff you're working on now with greater pride, knowing what you came from and where you started. I think that's just really, really cool. And that's making this painting very special for me to share with you guys. I am really excited to finish this piece and to get to show you what it looks like in the end. I am so stoked to see what it turns out looking like, because I don't know either. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.